I began this project thinking about my entire time at Dickinson, and I wanted it to be reflective of how much I've grown through the major and through my other major. So I declared my environmental studies major as a second semester freshman, and I ended up with a classical studies major. So I went from the social sciences into the humanities, and last semester I took a Buddhism and the environment class, and it totally transformed the way I was thinking about environmental challenges. And so I thought about my religion, and I've been practicing Catholicism since I was a little girl, and how much it influenced how I perceive the world and how I perceive the human place in nature. And so I thought religion might be a way for me to discover how others are viewing the world and how others are viewing their place in nature. So I decided to take this project and think about my path and then think about others' paths. And I convened religious scholars and asked them a number of questions relating to their origin story and relating to their religious doctrines, and asking them to think a little bit about climate change and individual action and responsibility. And it was so intriguing to find out that there were a bunch of themes throughout all the different religions, and none of them felt that religion was the pure answer, that it was going to be something that, this is your religion, you must follow it. They felt like it was a pathway to understanding the universe better, and it provided tools for people to interpret the world a little bit easier and to make things a little bit better. And so throughout this entire project, they identified about 5 or 6 themes. It was anything from the importance of shared humanity and looking at people and saying, you're a person too. There was the importance of being exposed to anything environmental or anything that had to do with respecting the land, so respect and mutuality. So early childhood exposure to the land in some contexts. We talked about power dynamics and the importance of negotiating with people in charge. We talked about individual versus collective action. We talked about stewardship and our responsibility as humans to either maintain the balance with the universe but also still be able to live in a healthy way. It was all the tensions that environmental studies has brought up throughout my time. And I don't think we answered anything completely, but like what they were telling me, I think religion provides a way to be content and to be okay with the chaos that is the world.
God created humans to, and like the English translation, maybe it's not very good, but like to subdue the earth. And I think a lot of people misread that as like, oh, so we can just do whatever we want, and like the earth is sort of ours to dominate. I think dominion is another, like have dominion over it. And so I think a lot of people misread that as like, okay, so we can just do whatever we want. We don't have to care about climate change. We can just like, tear the earth to shreds and it's like all ours. But I think like the actual understanding, or how I understand it, is like we were actually placed there to care for the earth and stewardship, to steward the earth and to care for it.
Can our religious traditions teach impulses, something that's just so organic and inside that I'll never forget driving with our kids when they were younger, and we were on the highway going somewhere, and somebody threw out what looked like probably their lunch. Just the entire bag, just wham, just flung it right out of it. And like they were like, Eames, just stop! And I was like, what do you want me to do with this lunch? And they're like, that man is treating the world like a trash can. And I was like, you know what, you got it. Like that, that's the impulse, right?
I remember like every time my younger brother or I, we'd go for a walk with my father or my mother, and we'd habitually just pull up a leaf from a tree or something. And they would be very strict about that. They'd say, no, this tree has feelings, this is bad. And before we left, we lived there for 5 years. We had like 3 trees in that house. And before we left, we had those special like sprouting trees. They grow for like 2 or 3 years, like 20 trees, and ours was the most like green house. And my mother was really into it, and she's like, yeah, it comes from faith.
What I've found is that, at least in my experience, that if you really try to connect with that person, even if you totally disagree with their particular view, they're a human being. And at some point, you know, and that's what I've realized by working with some of the people in power like that, is that, yes, they're lawyers, they're this, they're that, and those are all things we need to sustain life, right? We need businesses, we need all that stuff. But why do we do all those things? For poetry, for this, for that, you know, so all that really in the end. So when you talk to these people, you might think they're one way, but like being out in that lake with that fellow, he's completely the other way.
I think that we do have to own our role in climate change and all the things that have happened to creation and what we've done. I mean, I think that we're called to try to redeem and restore creation, I think from a Christian perspective. Does that mean all Christians any more than all Buddhists agree? No, there are Christians all the way across the spectrum of people that are very, they're vegetarians because of their faith. They're involved in creation care. There are Christians that could care less.
I think in order to see real change, it has to be on the individual, but also like there has to be like top-down changes as well. Because like if we're living in these systems that are like continuing to, like unless every single individual stops using straws, people are still gonna keep making them, you know, like, so like I think there has to be, it sort of has to come from like both levels.
What does it mean to be partners with God in the world? So that if God's the creator and all of creation is God's partners in some kind of way, how we live and how we embody all of these principles matter. I don't know if it matters, let's say, that that particular individual is doing that particular action so much, but the idea that our religious traditions kind of push us to do.
We can bring hope. So I think that we're people that know how to live in a hopeful place. I at least think from my own tradition, and so hope can also help carry us so that we don't like despair, right? Because it's still, from my tradition, I think the earth is God's earth, and so ultimately God desire is for a place of restoration for all creation.
Whether or not I ever figure out all the things that, you know, all the factors that made up how exactly I view something versus how somebody else views something is not the issue, but I think the point is that we all have to try. So I guess coming out of this project, I feel as though we should put more focus on our spirituality and more focus on humanness as a discipline to understand climate change and to understand climate action. And when I was at this conference a couple of weeks ago, it was very intriguing to see a lot of scientists feel the same way as that I was feeling. Is, you know, we need to put philosophy back into the question. We need to put religion back into the question. And so I hope moving forward that in order to solve this horrible challenge that we're going to be facing and what our future generations are going to be facing, that we put a little bit of humanity back into the question.